In the heart of Africa stood a kingdom with streetlights and urban planning long before Europe caught up. The secrets of the Benin Empire. It was the 15th century, and the world was on the brink of new discoveries. In Europe, vast empires were rising, and explorers were setting sail, charting the unknown oceans. Yet, hidden in the heart of West Africa, there was a kingdom that was already a marvel of engineering, art, and organization, a kingdom that had long surpassed the supposed advanced nations of Europe. The Benin Empire, a realm of immense power, wealth, and culture, stretched across the vast lands of modern-day Nigeria. At the heart of this empire was the city of Benin itself, a city so sophisticated that when the first Portuguese explorers encountered it, they couldn't comprehend what they saw. Benin was a city of straight, wide roads that wound through a network of neighborhoods, each arranged with a clear order. The streets, remarkably, were illuminated by lamps, a marvel that left Portuguese explorers astounded. How could an African city possess something Europe didn't have? A modern urban structure complete with streetlights, well-planned architecture, and drainage systems that seemed to belong to a world centuries ahead. The residents of Benin had mastered the art of building. Their homes and public buildings were constructed from earth and wood, intricately decorated with carvings that told stories of their past. But it wasn't just the architecture that made this city remarkable. It was the intricate planning. The city was designed to be both functional and beautiful, with market squares and temples, each in perfect alignment. A city built on advanced thinking, centuries before the Industrial Revolution. The impressive walls. Benin was not just a city, it was a fortress. The walls of Benin, constructed over hundreds of years, were legendary. Built to protect the kingdom from invading forces, these walls were not only a feat of military architecture, but also a work of engineering brilliance. They stretched over 16,000 kilometers, encircling the city and its outskirts, making them among the longest man-made structures on Earth at the time. The scale of the walls left the Portuguese, who had seen mighty European fortresses, speechless. How could a kingdom with limited contact with the rest of the world build such a structure? The answer was simple. They didn't need to look to Europe for guidance. They had mastered their own methods of construction, using indigenous materials like mud, palm fronds, and wooden beams. Even the city's gates were works of art, with carvings depicting the history and legends of Benin, each one telling a story of bravery, heritage, and the people's devotion to their king. These walls weren't just barriers. They were a symbol of the Benin Kingdom's strength, innovation, and identity. The Portuguese encounter. In 1485, Portuguese explorers arrived on the coast of West Africa. They had heard whispers of the great kingdom of Benin and were eager to see it for themselves. What they found astonished them. The Portuguese had arrived expecting to see a primitive society, but what they encountered was an advanced civilization that defied all their expectations. The first Portuguese official, Diogo Caio, recorded his encounter with the Benin people. He described the royal court of Benin as being unlike anything he had seen in Europe. The king, Oba Ewuare, was a figure of immense power and wealth, seated in a grand palace that stood in stark contrast to the simple dwellings of the Portuguese. The Oba's court was full of life, music, and ceremony, with highly trained guards and diplomats managing relations with the Portuguese. But what struck the Portuguese most was the presence of streetlights. In Europe, the concept of street illumination was still in its infancy. London, for example, didn't have streetlights until the 16th century, but in Benin, the people used lamps to light their streets, making the city glow with an ethereal light long before European cities adopted this technology. The Portuguese were stunned. How could a kingdom in Africa, isolated from Europe, possess such advanced technology? How could a people with limited contact with the outside world have mastered urban planning, street lighting, and engineering at such an early stage? These questions would haunt them for centuries. The legacy of Benin. As the Portuguese explored Benin, they quickly realized that the kingdom's wealth was not just in its architecture but in its people. The artisans of Benin were renowned for their skill in creating bronze plaques, intricate sculptures, and beads. These artists had a unique ability to work with metal, crafting masterpieces that told the story of their people's history. The Benin bronzes, as they came to be known, were unlike anything seen in Europe. The Portuguese, eager to take these treasures back to their own land, began to steal them. In a tragic turn of events, many of these masterpieces were looted and taken from Benin, sold in European markets, and placed in museums, where they remain today as a testament to the greatness of the Benin Empire. However, Benin's true legacy cannot be measured in gold, bronzes, or artifacts. It was in the innovation of its people, the ingenuity of its designs, and the structure of its cities. While Europe was still struggling to build proper cities, Benin had already mastered the art of urban living. They had the foresight to plan not just for their present, but for their future. The Oba's court, the intricate road systems, the impressive walls, and the gleaming streetlights were all products of a society that understood the importance of order, organization, and forward thinking. A society that knew how to blend beauty with functionality, tradition with innovation. The fall of Benin. Despite its advanced nature, the Benin Empire was not immune to the tides of history. In 1897, British forces invaded the city in what would become known as the Benin Expedition. The city was looted, and much of its cultural heritage was destroyed or stolen. The once thriving kingdom fell under British control, and the streets that once glowed with light fell dark. But even in its fall, the legacy of Benin endured. Today, the remnants of the Great Walls, the bronzes, and the stories of the kingdom continue to captivate the world. The city that had been more advanced than London in its time still stands as a reminder that Africa's history is not one of backwardness, but one of brilliance. The fall of Benin was not the end of its story. The story of the kingdom's advancements, its streetlights, its urban planning, its arts, and its people, lives on. And as we look back at that magnificent kingdom, we are reminded of a time when the heart of Africa beat with a rhythm far ahead of its time. In the heart of Africa stood a kingdom that was more advanced than many in Europe. The Benin Empire, with its incredible city planning, its knowledge of engineering, and its cultural richness, was a marvel of the ancient world. When Europeans arrived, they were met with a civilization that had long surpassed their own in terms of urban development. The story of Benin is one of greatness, innovation, and a reminder that Africa, too, has a deep history of sophistication and advancement. And though the city may have fallen, its legacy remains. The next time you walk through a modern city or see streetlights lighting the streets, think of Benin. For in its time, it was far ahead of the curve, a beacon of light in a world still waiting to catch up.